Hey, what's up? It's Tuhu. Fushwen's right around the corner, and since I'm gonna get a video out on her as soon as I can once she's out, here's a guide on how to play the Dragon Delivery Boy, DHL. Danheng Imbibitor Lunai, or as the community calls him, DHIL, is a 5-star imaginary DPS who debuted with the first half of 1.3, but because I come from the FGO community, I'm gonna call him Daniel Alter. As for why Daniel, I don't know, he just kinda looks like a Daniel. Here's the TLDR. Danny Phantom is now perhaps the game's strongest DPS in terms of raw damage output and potential. He's an extremely potent carry and perfect if you've been looking for an imaginary DPS and you still don't have Welt yet, or maybe you do, but you're one of those idiots who thinks that just because a stronger character comes out in a gacha game, that automatically means that everyone else who came before them now sucks. But as much as seemingly everyone in the Star Rail community right now thinks he's absolutely broken, I don't quite agree. Why not? Well, stick around and find out. First though, we gotta take a look at his stats. At level 80, he's got 1241 HP, 698 attack, 336 defense, and 102 speed. Right away, both his HP and attack stand out as being very high. He has the same base HP as Bronya, who's a support, mind you, and has even higher base attack than Kafka. So not only is he naturally tankier than your other DPSs, but he's also one of your harder hitting ones too, if not the hardest hitting. This being said, he shares the same base defense value as Selly, which is pretty low, and is just about in the middle of the speed spectrum, so even though he does have a lot more health than your average carry, he can still take quite a bit of damage and still needs some speed tuning, though more on that later. Now onto his kit, starting with his skill, which is called Jacore Libre. I didn't know he was a luchador in his free time. It's a stackable enhancement skill that powers up his basic attack up to 3 times. On Daniel's turn, when you pop his skill, it immediately enhances his basic attack to level 1. Pop it again, his basic goes up to level 2, and do it a 3rd time, it maxes out at level 3, which more or less describes your level of horror when you start binging videos from how to basic. Using this skill alone doesn't end Daniel's turn, since all it's doing is powering up his basic attack, and you don't actually use up any skill points either just for doing so. It's only when he does basic attack that he uses his turn and the skill points you've invested for it. And if you use a skill on accident, or you use it and then you change your mind about using it, you can always just cancel his enhancements by pressing X, which is quite appropriate because you're doubting yourself and the power of Chinese Danny Phantom, you coward, or whatever the button's gonna be on the PS5 version. By the way, welcome to Star Rail console players, and go ask me Hoyo how the Switch version's coming along. Anyways, the last perk of his skill is that when he uses his level 2 or 3 enhanced basic, he gives himself 1 stack of a unique outroar buff before each individual hit of those attacks, but only starting from the 4th hit onwards. Outroar increases his crit damage by 6 to 15% from levels 1 to 15 for 1 turn per stack, but he can only have 4 stacks maximum. Normally, I don't bother going over character basic attacks since most of them don't do anything special, but since Daniel's one of those characters who can enhance their basic, I will here. His ordinary basic, or his level 0, just to keep up the naming convention, is like this, but his level 1 is called Transcendence, which is a 3-hit single target attack that deals 130 to 338% damage from levels 1 to 9. It generates 30 energy and deals 60 weakness damage, the same as most characters' skills. His level 2 is called Divine Spear, and this is where things get interesting. His basic attack becomes a 5-hit attack that deals 190 to 494% damage to a single target, but it also deals an additional 30 to 78% damage to any enemies adjacent to Daniel's main target, or what I like to call splash damage, no pun intended, from the 4th hit of this attack onwards. It also generates 35 energy, which may be unique to him in terms of energy gen, because I don't know if anyone else gets 35 energy for doing something, and deals 90 weakness damage, which is the same amount that single target ultimates do, and 30 weakness damage for these splash targets. Lastly, his level 3 is called Fulgurant Leap, which probably means Daniel stole the name from Fulgur when he accidentally time traveled into the Star Rail timeline somehow. This hits 7 times and deals 250 to 650% damage to its main target and 90 to 234% splash damage to adjacent targets, again from the 4th hit onwards. It generates 40 energy and deals a whopping 120 weakness damage to its main target, which might be the most amount of weakness damage any character can deal in this game, and 60 splash. With all this, you might have forgotten that Daniel still has an ultimate that we gotta cover, which is called Azure's Aqua Ablutes All. It's a 3-hit splash attack attack, just like his level 2 and 3 basics, that deals 180 to 360% damage to its main target, and 84 to 168% splash damage to the sides. It also regens the standard 5 energy after use, and deals the standard 60 weakness damage to all targets. After it's used, the ult then gives Daniel 2 stacks of Squama Sacrosancta, but since that's a frickin' tongue twister, let's just call them bonus skill points, or bonus SP for short. These bonus skill points are exclusive to Daniel, as in only he can use them. And when he uses his skill to enhance his basic, he uses his bonus skill points first if he has any in the place of the team's SP. He can hold up to 3 of these bonus skill points at a time, as indicated by the 3 dots on his avatar in-game. His talent, Righteous Heart, gives him 1 stack of a Righteous Heart buff after every individual hit of any attack that he does, which then increases his damage by 5 to 12.5%, and they can stack up to 6 times and last for 1 turn. And for his technique, Heaven Quelling Prisma Dragon, or however you pronounce that, Daniel becomes Oryx from Rainbow Six Siege and enters the Leaping Dragon state for 20 seconds that really makes him look like Danny Phantom. While he's boosted, he dashes forward a pretty long distance, and if he tackles an enemy, like he's tackling a Grant-a-Wish kid, he deals 120% damage to all enemies at the start of the fight and starts off with 1 bonus skill point. So whenever you run into an adventure node while playing Swarm, basically those bonus nodes where you either gotta break the barrels or slaughter all the warp trotters like they're ferals in the middle of Texas, drag this guy out of the downloader cause you sure as hell ain't getting top scores without him. Let's go over his trace tree. His trace stats are 12% crit rate, 22.4% imaginary damage, and 10% HP when they're all unlocked. And his 3 bonus abilities are Star Veil, which regens 15 energy for Daniel at the start of every battle, Aqua Rain, which increases his crowd control resist by 35%, and Jolt Anew, which increases his crit damage by 24% whenever he attacks enemies that are weak to imaginary. Unlock Jolt Anew and Star Veil together first. Jolt Anew is his best bonus ability, and Star Veil doesn't cost a track of destiny, and leave Aqua Rain for last. Okay, now that we've gone over his entire kit, let's analyze it and put together a game plan for him. The analysis part is pretty complicated, so yeah, try to pay attention, okay? He does
damage.
A lot of
Damage.
A whole ton of
Damage. No, that's a lot of damage!
Okay, you get the point. Daniel shits out damage, and it mainly comes from his enhanced basics, ideally from his level 3. This means that his game plan is to use level 3s whenever you've got the skill points to spare, and use his ultimate to fuel his subsequent level 3s to keep the damage train going. For optimal play, since his Outroar buff only triggers when he uses either his level 2 or 3, try to make it so his level 2 or 3 basic gets him his ult, and then ult afterwards so that his ultimate also has the Outroar buff too for even more damage. Basically, your standard win condition with MiHoYo's version of Tien Shin Han is to get him to use as many tri-beam cannons as he can. Hey, he might as well be a Dragon Ball Z character with all those instant transmissions, finger motions, and energy blasts that he does. Now, time for the part of the video that some of you who got baited into watching this video from the thumbnail are here for. If Daniel Alter does so much frickin' damage, why am I not parroting the rest of the Star Rail community and saying that he's absolutely broken, he's the new meta, the best new damage dealer, the newest DPS king, the true hyper carry, or whatever the fuck else clickbaiting YouTubers like me say to get you to watch our videos? It's mainly because of principle, because to me, the core aspect of something that's broken in a game like Star Rail is whether they have any downsides to being used. And in the case of Daniel Alter, he has a very glaring downside. He eats skill points faster than Star Rail becomes a better game than Genshin. Not that that was very hard to do anyway. Without access to his bonus skill points, Daniel can use up to 3 normal skill points at a time, and he's the only character in the game currently who can even use more than 1 skill point at a time at all. Considering that's more than half the total amount of SP that you can have at any given time, he'll be hogging the big majority of your SP flow if you want him to constantly use level 3s, leaving precious little for the rest of his team to use for, support, utility, and healing. So in order to remedy this, you have to do one of 2 things. One, you consciously manage how many skill points Daniel uses for his basics, which is a novel concept for a community who just wants to auto everything in the game, I know. Instead of spamming the E key as soon as it's his turn like you're playing Bennett in Genshin Impact, you take the time to see how many skill points you have and other current battle conditions and enhance Daniel's basics accordingly. 2, you specifically run Daniel in a team with characters characters who are SP positive, or in other words, don't use a lot of skill points themselves, so that your DPS, in this case Daniel, can more safely use more of them. So characters like Tingyun, who's the best harmony support for him in this regard, Pella, Silverwolf, and Luocha. But both of these countermeasures still have their downsides. For example, if you control how many skill points Daniel uses, you're consciously limiting his damage output, even though you're doing it so that he doesn't get smacked in the face and die because your healer didn't have any skill points to heal his skill point hogging ass. If you run him in an SP positive team, hopefully you don't throw him into a fight where nothing is weak to imaginary, and if you do, I hope you have Silverwolf. To be fair, even a free-to-play Daniel should still be able to handle most fights even without imaginary advantage as long as he's geared and leveled well enough, especially with a skill point positive team backing him up, and it's only the final few floors of MOC, or like Swarm 5, that he might have trouble with, so the only problem you'd have at that point is Cartman asking you if you're HIV positive too. Still, since I'm basing this off of principle, the fact that you may have to tailor a team specifically for Daniel means that you can't just use this team everywhere, since there are enemies and boss fights that aren't weak to imaginary. Again, you can just bring Silverwolf to, force things to be weak to imaginary for him, but then that requires you to have Silverwolf in the first place, who herself is yet another limited 5-star character. And for players who are lucky enough to have both of them, for a lot of them, those two characters combined are probably the majority of their accounts' power, so putting them both on the same team means that they could be fucked for MOC. So you might be wondering, hey Tuhu, so if you don't think Daniel Alter is broken, then who is? Who fits your definition of broken in this game? Well, I'm glad you asked, even if you didn't, because I did. The most broken character in the game is Bronya, because there is virtually no downside to putting her on a team, because every team needs a DPS unless you enjoy murdering your brain cells with a 2-hour-long MOC 8 stall, but to be fair, as gacha game players, it's not like we needed brain cells anyway. I mean, I did just call the Star Rail player base brain dead for calling Daniel Alter broken, so the logic checks out. And Bronya's the best buffer in the game with the best skill in the game, and so if you're ever wondering what kind of support buffer you should take for a team, you can just insta-lock Bronya if you have her, like you're an insta-lock Jet main thinking you'll be DRX's next pickup. Her element is also largely irrelevant since you're using her for her buffs, so that helps make her even more universal. What downsides she does have are things that, many other characters share too. She's a 5-star character, so that means not everyone has her, but then again, most players don't have all the characters in the game either, and I'm still waiting for Himeko to spook me, damn it, and I don't give a shit about how bad she is. Bronya is also a skill point hog with how good her skill is, but she's far from the only one who does, and at least her skill doesn't potentially cost 3 whole frickin' skill points every time I use the damn thing. This isn't a Bronya review, so I'll just stop there, and besides, I already made a video about her a few months ago, so go watch that for more details. But the point I'm making here is that y'all don't know what broken means if all it takes for you to say that a character's broken is watching them put up 6-digit damage numbers and that's it. Like, I get it. We've been here before with Genshin Impact back in 2020 when 6-digit reverse vape damage numbers on YouTube thumbnails were all the rage and people thought Bennett was trash for some reason, but that sort of makes it even worse since it means nobody learned their fucking lesson. At the very least, I don't think I've seen anyone call Bronya trash, so that's an improvement at least. So rather than call him broken, I'll just call Daniel really fucking good and definitely worth your Stellar Jades if you're looking for a new carry, especially an imaginary one. So, did I just spend the last 5 minutes or so basically calling the Star Rail community stupid for using the term broken improperly, just to come to the same conclusion that, DHIL good? Why, yes I did. And I'll do it again. Now that I've gotten that off my chest, it's time to go over his light cones. Grab Brighter Than the Sun from gacha if you can, obviously, but if you can't, his only other decent 5-star option is Fall of an Aeon, which is the free one from Herta's store in Sim Universe, since it gives him both extra attack and damage, and Daniel can break enemies very easily with his enhanced basics. For his 4-star options, take anything that gives him an attack buff. Normally, DPSs want damage buffs since they usually give themselves attack buffs through their kits, but Daniel's kit is the opposite, as in it gives him a lot of damage buffs, but not really any attack buffs, though Secret Vow is still good in case you can stack a lot of attack on him anyway through his relics. And if you gotta go budget because you went broke for that dragon bussy, then Collapsing Skies got your back. Now for relics and relic stats, his two go-to orbital sets are 4-piece Musketeer and 4-piece Imaginary. I've heard that 4-piece Musketeer is apparently his best set for reasons I'll try to explain later when we go over relic main stats, but I prefer Imaginary since the 4-piece effects extra crit buffs make it easier to build him, and I like having a fast Daniel with conventional speed boots. Since I mentioned Silverwolf before, daily reminder that you can give 4-piece Quantum to any DPS you pair up with her because I have 20% defense pierce now, so you can go fuck yourself. Normally this is a niche set that you'll realistically only use with Silverwolf, but as of the Swarm update, where Neurosama has turned evil for real this time,
you don't know me. Evil laughter.
Murdered Vidal and invaded the Star Rail servers to command the Swarm as per the prophecy, remember that the Swarm bugs are weak to both Imaginary and Quantum. I wonder why. So if you like those bugs as much as miHoYo likes endgame Genshin players, don't forget the Quantum Cavern is always there for you. For ornament sets, Space Sealing Station and Rudolent Arena are the go-tos, but Daniel's damage output is so high that he can actually use Celestial Differentiator if you really want him to. Matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Daniel Alter is the reason why the Celestial set even exists in the first place. I just hope you can actually one-shot everything with it, so yeah, good luck with MOC 10 and Swarm 5. For main stats, either attack boots or speed boots. Crit damage body ideally, but you can even run attack body if you think his crit stats are good enough already. Attack rope and imaginary planar. I believe the rationale for attack boots on Daniel Alter is that without speed boots, he gets his turn less, which both helps mitigate his skill point intake and makes his enhanced basics hit a lot harder since he doesn't give himself a lot of attack buffs from his own kit, so getting them from his relics will scale up his damage a lot better. This being said, I would mainly recommend this for a 4-piece Musketeer build since you're getting a speed buff out of it too. It'll also help if you give a teammate 4-piece speed to further help him out. You can do this for Imaginary too, but you gotta get pretty damn lucky with speed substats, as in he gets so much speed from his substats alone that you might as well run attack boots at that point. For substat priority, go for the usual double crit, attack, and speed, followed by break effect and maybe HP percent to make him a little tankier. One thing to note that I forgot to bring up earlier, higher hit counts are better in Star Rail because the individual hits can crit, meaning that a DPS with higher hit count attacks can afford to run lower crit rate stats than one with lower hit counts. Daniel has a ton of hits, and even more so when he's hitting multiple enemies, so while obviously the more crit rate the better, he can work with lower crit rate stats if you don't feel like engaging in cock and ball torture. Relic farming as much as you normally would for other characters. Finally, let's go over his Eidolons. His E1 increases his talent's Righteous Heart limit by 4, so 10 maximum now, and gives him an extra stack per hit, so in other words, a considerable damage buff that'll stack even better with any attack stats that you give him. His E2 advances his turn forward by 100% after he ults and gives him 3 bonus skill points instead of 2, so that way he can loop his level 3 after ulting. His E4 makes his Outroar buff on his skill last for 2 turns instead of 1, which should make it stack for even more damage buffs, and his E6 grants his level 3 an extra 20% imaginary pierce every time a teammate specifically uses their ultimate, up to 3 times to cover the whole team. So for fights where you can start the team with full ult charges, Daniel can just top deck bitches instantly if he's strong enough. All of his Eidolons are unga bunga do a million more fucking damage, so while they're pretty one-dimensional, they're still really good. Funnily enough, this makes his E6, actually, the most interesting Eidolon because it legit makes the Celestial Differentiator ornament set viable on him if you shove so much crit damage down his throat that he'll be shitting it all out in the morning. In summary, DHIL is a hilariously strong imaginary carry and one of the best DPSs in the whole game, if not the best in terms of just raw damage output, but hey, you didn't need me to tell you that now, did you? Waterboarding people like he's a prison guard at Guantanamo Bay is all he's really good at though, and he's gonna chew through a ton of taxpayer dollars in the process, I mean your skill points, but at least he's really good at his job and is worth the skill points that you use on him, as long as you're not just throwing them around like the American Congress throws around money when it comes to defense economics. If you are though, then his skill point consumption can really drag down the rest of your team, which in turn makes their job of supporting him more difficult, so it's a drawback that holds him back from being broken, like so many of the people claim that he is. But if you can manage it, which honestly isn't that hard, just stop spamming E whenever it's Daniel's turn, he'll nuke everything in your way for you, at least everything that's weak to imaginary. And now that Tingyun's dead, make sure to do her a favor and slap the fuck out of Fantilia's massive milkers with them every week. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. I'll be working on a Fushuen video that I'll hopefully put out as soon as possible after she comes out later this week, so look forward to that. I'll also be streaming my Fushuen rules over at twitch.tv/ToadSniper98, so come and hang out for the rules and see how well she does, because I've already pre-farmed everything for her. Thanks for watching, peace!